It's Mackey and Judd with Ramie.
All right, welcome in. Insta start to the show today because we want to dive right into it.
Voice guy, get it out.
No,
Let's go.
had to cut him off. Ramie Mackloff in quarantine studio Q. Mackey and Judd here in the main studio, socially distanced. And we're going to start the show right. We only get about 10 minutes here, so we don't usually start the show with guests, but we're all salivating over The Last Dance, which is going to come out this Sunday. Parts 1 and 2 of a 10-part series on ESPN if you want the adult language, and ESPN2 if you want the good for kids edition. And Jason Hehir is the director of this docuseries chronicling the 1997-1998 Chicago Bulls season. Thank you for joining the show, Jason, and I'll start you off with this one. What is the number one best thing in your mind about The Last Dance? Why we will enjoy it the most as an audience?
I think that you probably think you know who Michael Jordan is. You think that you've heard every story there is to hear about him. You get it. The Bulls were great. I know that this goes much deeper than that. So my goal for this thing is people I'm 43 years old. People of my generation who watched him play and watched these teams play, is that they have a bit of nostalgia and they reminisce about watching them play, but then they also learn a ton about what was actually going on behind the scenes, and that the generation after me, who knows him as a logo on a shoe and just a poster on a wall, gets to learn what true greatness was all about.
I was 5 years old, living in Chicago when Michael Jordan was drafted. So I grew up with Michael Jordan, and the dude, and I don't think this is just me or people who grew up Bulls fans or MJ fans, he was like a superhero. He very rarely showed the human side of him or any chinks in the armor. Does this humanize him?
It does. I hope it does. That was my goal from the outset, was to humanize him and Scotty and Phil and Dennis and Steve Kerr and all of these guys, because on some level they all seemed like superheroes because they seemed invincible. Year after year, it was death, taxes, and the Bulls in the finals in June for the 90s. One of my favorite stats about that team is that every single time that Michael Jordan was present for day one of Bulls training camp in the 1990s, they won the NBA title. So it was a given that they were going to be there in June. So it seems easy, but I think that I hope that this documentary peels back the onion a little bit and shows you just how challenging it is and how difficult it is to have greatness in the first place, but sustained greatness even more importantly.
Talk us through the process of this and how it came about that it was not just an hour long or two, but a 10-part series, because that's got to turn into at some point in time a daunting task.
It was daunting, but it was brought to me that way. It was brought to me as an 8-hour series. They said that we're casting a wide net for directors, and we have Michael Jordan's involvement and sign off, and he's going to participate in this. And there's a treasure trove of footage that no one's ever seen from a crew that was embedded with the team in 97-98. So we want to tell the story of that season and Michael Jordan through that footage. So it was then my role to go back and say what my vision for this thing would be. So I just kind of buried myself in all things Jordan and Bulls for 2 weeks and emerged from that cave with a 14-page outline for what I saw this 8-episode at the time series as being. And I thought that we could do a lot more than just tell the story of that season. I thought it was possible to tell the story of the entire dynasty through the lens of that season, and to tell the story of Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Phil Jackson and Dennis Rodman and Steve Kerr and Tony Kukoc and all of those guys through the lens of that season, because that season was so momentous on so many levels that we could use it as a jumping off point to tell a ton of different stories. So what you're getting is a macro documentary told over the course of 10 hours, but encapsulated in that are several micro documentaries.
Jason, you've also directed the Fab Five, the 85 Bears, 30 for 30, the Andre the Giant, 30 for 30. How does this one compare in terms of everything, really? How does this one compare in terms of storytelling, intrigue, stories that maybe grip the audience?
Well, I can say that it's tough to rank them. It's like ranking your kids, but I can say that all of the pitfalls that we experienced in making the documentaries you just mentioned, we didn't experience with this doc. So, we had an incredible story with an incredible cast of characters, and everyone was willing to participate. Whereas when you look at Andre the Giant or 85 Bears or the Fab Five, either it happened so long ago that a lot of guys are passed away and they can't speak for themselves and they're not alive to be interviewed. Or in the case of Chris Webber and the Fab Five, Chris wasn't willing to participate in the doc and we didn't have his cooperation. In this case, we have almost every single one of the key figures is alive and willing and ready to tell their story in a forthcoming, honest way. And we have maybe a more compelling story than any of the ones you just mentioned because of the depth of all the angles that we get to cover here. So we have the time, we have the resources, and we have 10 hours to tell you a lot of mini stories in one macro story.
So you said he signed off on this. He was on board before even you were, Jason, right?
He was.
Did he tell you why? Was this something that he wanted to do and he put in motion?
He told me why not. I asked him, why do you want to do this? Why now? And he said, I don't want to do this. And I said, why don't you? And he said, because when you and the world sees this footage, they're going to see someone who is really intense. It's really raw. There's a lot of behavior towards his teammates during practices. He's an intense competitor, and we know him as such. He wanted to make those practices harder than the games were so that when they faced the toughest opponents that they could face in the playoffs, it seemed like nothing compared to the way that he had been treating them in practice. So on and off the court, I think that he was a little bit reluctant to let people see this without context. Now, what we have on our side and what I tried to impress upon him is that we have on our side context. We can sit down and you can explain exactly why you behaved the way you behaved and why you made this decision and why you said this to that guy during that practice. I can show you all of this footage and you can explain to me how you were feeling on that day. So context is everything, and honesty and trust in the documentary is everything. So I hope that he knew that I wanted to tell an honest, responsible, comprehensive story, and I needed his trust to know that he was in safe hands, that we're going to tell an honest story, but also tell one that was true to him.
In your mind, how much differently, good or bad, do you think people will look at Jordan once they see this?
I think that they will look at him in a more positive light. And it's tough to say that people look at Michael Jordan more positively because he's one of the most revered, admired figures of our generation. But I think that if there's any drawback to his image, people would say, well, yeah, he was a winner. He was a ferocious competitor. Maybe he wasn't the nicest guy. And I was interested to explore that with him, whether or not that bugged him, because in all of my experiences, he was a nice guy. And he was extremely respectful to me and to my crew and to his friends and his family and strangers alike in all of my dealings with him. So I wanted to know, as a human being, if that bothered him, if the trade-off was worth it, that he has the reputation of being the most ferocious competitor in the history of sports, but he's not considered a nice guy by a lot of people. And that question gleaned a 8 or 9 minute answer that you'll see later in the series at the end of episode 7 specifically, in which he explains how he feels about that and explains, his ambivalence towards that image and why he acted the way he did and what it took to be as great as he was and why he is who he is. So I think that we got as close to the core of him as I could have hoped we would have gotten, and that's a testament to him and his trust in us and his willingness to be forthcoming.
This thing was originally supposed to be put out in June, I believe, and as soon as we were all put into quarantine, the entire sports world, desperate for something to watch, was clamoring for this to be put out ahead of schedule. How annoyed were you by that?
0%
Really?
by it. I was excited by it because we had finished some of these episodes already. So we were having discussions internally immediately as soon as the people online were having discussions. It was a day or two into the lockdown when people were saying like, hey, what about that Last Dance thing? We need something to watch. And April 19th at that point felt like 2050. It seemed like a long time away. But we were all saying internally, we can get some of these out there. how quickly can we finish the last ones? Now, to be candid, we're not done with the series. We're still editing this in our apartments in New York right now. As soon as I get off this call and a couple of other calls, I have to get back to my computer and start editing again with our other editors and send each other segments. And we're cobbling together the final 2 episodes as we speak via our home computers. But we knew that we could get the first ones out there, and we wanted to get these out on a consistent basis. We didn't want to put out episodes 1 and 2 on March 25th and then say, okay, you can't see anything else until May 3rd. We wanted to see, all right, when is the last one going to be done? And now let's back time it from there and see how consistently can we release these things. Do we want to do 10 weeks of 1 episode a week? Well, that seemed like not enough. How about 5 weeks of 2 episodes a week? And everyone started to say, all right, that seems like something that we can all accomplish. And it's a testament to the people who we work in multi-million-dollar rooms with state-of-the-art equipment. And at the drop of a hat, all of a sudden, the people who were in charge of the logistics of this thing had to figure out a workflow to get, a global 10-hour documentary on the air from someone's home computer in an apartment in the middle of Manhattan.
Amazing. Well, we're looking forward to it, and we know that you have time constraints here, and so we really appreciate you coming on and talking about The Last Dance. Jason Hehir, the director.
And getting it done early. We especially want to thank you for that, because we're all
Absolutely.
desperate.
Yes. So.
It is, honestly, man, I don't mean to sound like magnanimous or anything, but it's a privilege and something that we all take really seriously and that we're all happy. We can't give blood. You can't go give a stranger a hug. We can't go to ERs and help people. There's nothing that anyone can do right now, and that's part of the angst that we all feel. So our team is very proud that, you know what, we can distract you for an hour or 2. We can take you back in time for an hour or 2, let you experience some nostalgia, and let you have some fun with sports for an hour or 2 a week. And we're really excited to do that.
Jason, thank you.
You're welcome, man. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. That's Jason Hehir, the director of The Last Dance. It premieres this Sunday night on ESPN and ESPN2 at 8 o'clock Central Time. 2 hours, 2 episodes, and then every Sunday going forward for 5 weeks. And guys,
that guy's
with no baseball,
that guy is one of the Avengers.
So pumped for this.
I can't wait. I cannot wait for this thing, man. I really can't. Can we just do it? Can we just get it done now? Can we just get it on TV now? I know I'm being impatient. I know I'm being ungrateful. But damn, man.
Are you going to watch show by show? Because you're the classic binger guy.
Yeah, do I have a choice, Judd? Am I just going to
wait
until all 10 episodes are out?
You could wait.
As desperate as I am now for content? No, I'm watching.
Right.
I'm watching whatever they give me whenever they give it to me.
Just morsel by morsel, Ramie. Have to be patient.
This is the. I was excited for Twins games and stuff. This is the only thing really to be excited for in terms of there's not going to be new TV shows that come out. They're not unless they've got something in the can. If Billions is Billions back out, Billions might be back out.
Never watched Billions.
It's a good show, but there's not no one's getting in studios and doing shows now. So
Correct.
either you have your footage recorded and you're going to release something,
Correct.
or we're just going to wait for months and months.
How scared would you guys be that this thing, the part 1 is airing, and he didn't say how many parts are not done yet. But he said the last few episodes are not done. How scared would you be with that type of deadline, that type of clock ticking on you?
Honestly, those guys, ESPN has so many producers, too, that if they needed to put 10 extra producers on it, it's not like producers have anything to do right now. So
I've been in a situation kind of like this before, not on the level that he is, but when I worked on a Brewers postgame show down in Milwaukee at the end of the season every year, I was the producer on the show. I would put together a season retrospective that was just pieced together highlights, interviews, locker room sound, music, and it was a huge project. I would put 25, 30 hours into this project before all was said and done.
Mm-hmm.
And we would literally be airing the first segment, and I'd be working on the second segment, and then we'd be airing the second segment, and I'm still working on the third segment, just sweat pouring off my brow while this is going on.
So, Ramie, are you afraid? I mean, this is your team.
Yes.
And so I'm sure it's going to be really, really cool. Are you afraid, though, that by the end of this, that in some ways, as a kid or as a guy who grew up as a kid, as a Bulls fan of this team, that you're actually going to be more upset? Because, this whole thing is based on the fact it starts with Jerry Krause telling Phil Jackson, you can go 82-0 and you're gone.
I kind of knew that already.
Right? No, I know, but you're going to find out like all of the gory details of the fact that it does look like they took an NBA championship team that could have, continued what?
Yeah, God knows.
Exactly right. So I'm just curious if Bulls fans are going to look back and be like,
I think if I was younger and a little bit still more naive about the sports world and didn't because I think there's a certain age where we all come to realize, oh, these are human beings. Like they're extremely talented human beings at something that entertains me, but they're still human beings. And especially when you work in the business that we work in and you interact with professional athletes, it really hits home and sets in that these are human beings. So it might take some of the shine, some of the luster off the myth that is Michael Jordan and those Bulls teams, but I don't think there's going to be anything in here. I hope there isn't anything in here that completely sours it for me or completely changes the way that I look at MJ and the Bulls.
Yeah, I'm not saying sours.
I mean, the most telling thing to me is the fact that Michael Jordan goes on Good Morning America yesterday or whenever it was. Quotes came out. I saw him this morning. And Michael Jordan has been mostly unapologetic for his entire career and life, right? He has just plowed forward with very little empathy and has made his brand what it is. And when he is asked about the documentary and, what can we expect? And he's a little bit like, I feel like I might be portrayed as a bad human and teammate in this documentary. Like when even he has to say, I don't know.